The International Association for Near-Death Studies presents NDE Radio, a weekly exploration of near-death experiences and similar encounters with the other side. Now, here's your host, Lee Witting.
Welcome to NDE Radio, brought to you by IANDS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies. I'm your host, Lee Witting. Our guest today, Peter Anthony, is a producer, psychic, and paranormal investigator, a contributing writer for several spiritual magazines across the country, and the author of Keymaster. He is, as well, a numerology life coach and a chaplain to the world of ghosts. Before his NDE, Peter had studied to become a special effects makeup artist. He rose quickly and was soon working with the who's who in showbiz as a freelance image consultant. But in 1987, the after effects of a near-death experience presented Peter with an inexplicable gift of mathematical codes. This life-changing event meant his artistic talents were replaced with arithmetical knowledge, allowing him to become an expert in numerology as well as an intuitive. In 1995, Peter's NDE gifted abilities landed him on the paranormal TV show Sightings, and from there he traveled extensively throughout America, working alongside a team of paranormal and forensic experts. As a psychic detective, Peter helped resolve forgotten murder cases, as well as exploring haunted houses, cemeteries, abandoned caves, and concentration camps. And as a result of this work, Peter has been featured on many TV and radio shows. Peter Anthony's book tour across America promoted IANDS and helped him to become, led him to become a speaker for NDEers. And Peter's book, Keymaster, inspired by his own NDE, has been inducted into the Edgar Cayce Library and is under development for a film. The Keymaster offers a thought-provoking perspective with the intention of allowing the reader to discover wisdom from beyond. Peter Anthony's second book, The Accidental Prophet, is soon to be released. Peter, welcome to NDE Radio.
Well, thank you guys so very much. And I have to say this to your listening audience. We all have choices, and, whatever choice you make when you listen to this, I say thank you because you are allowing me a moment of your life and a moment of my life so that we can kind of connect. And then I also say to you, Lee, thank you for doing this work because it allows so many of us who've had near-death experiences to get out and to share our words. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome, and thank you for coming on the show and sharing your story with us. Peter, in 1987, you were rushed to the hospital with what you've described as a burst intestine. I can only imagine the amount of massive infection that must have triggered in your body and triggered as well your near-death experience. You were unconscious for 3.5 weeks. Tell us what you experienced during that time.
Well, it's funny because so many people who talk about that state of unawareness during a coma or just being unconscious. I had a dear female friend of mine who, while I was in intensive care, would come to me and read to me. And the doctors and nurses would make fun of her. And when I did regain my consciousness, I remembered much of what she shared with me. And part of that, of my, my fascination with numerology, had to do with the numbers I saw on the other side. But for some reason, she was tuned into that, not knowing that I, had these experiences with numeric codes and quantum physics. She would bring numerology books and teach me the basic, numbers 1 through 9 and the basic understandings of astrology. So when I woke up, I retained all that.
Wow. Well, tell us about what you saw during your NDE. I know you talked about first being outside your body and seeing that, and then a rotating bullseye tunnel. What was that like?
The bullseye. It's you see this rotating. I should call it the love tunnel, but it's this rotating tunnel, and I guess when I finally got into the OR and I was in and out of consciousness, I had lost so much blood, from the summer up until November the 11th. And, I had, unfortunately, back during the AIDS epidemic back in 1987, there were so many people, medical crew, who were afraid of me. So one of the nurses was suited up like I was radioactive and just left me in a hallway. And so I was there probably an hour and a half, if not longer, and basically bleeding to death. So when I got into the OR, finally, I was a goner. It was at that point in time almost too late. And I think by the time they got the IVs in me, my veins had collapsed. And as I was seeing myself go in and out of physical form to what I call spirit form, I could see this rotating tunnel. And I feel as though, and I say feel now, but I mean, I felt then as though a vacuum was attached to my solar plexus and I was being pulled into this bullseye. And I remember going through this bullseye, but before all that, I went into that tunnel completely. Peter Anthony in spirit form was looking down at Peter Anthony in physical form on the operating table, and everything went in slow motion. And I watched the medical doctors, go into medical protocol, and I could hear their thoughts and I could sense, the desperation. And when I finally did go into the tunnel, it was as though this whatever was attached to my solar plexus almost snapped. I could hear this snapping like a hand or a thumb snapping. And then I remember being sucked into this vibrating tunnel. 4 things here. Besides mathematical codes, the triple codes and the quantum physics and geometry, I was seeing the 222s and 333s and the 444s and the 999s. Part 2 of that, which I think is fascinating, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, I was being downloaded with so much information. And so I said on a radio interview not too long ago, I was able, if you had to kind of compare it to anything, reading the Bible from start to finish and digesting every bit of it. And so here I am downloading the mind of, say, Tesla and Einstein and your English professor, your my art teacher. All this information from what I considered those people who were the experts, who were the geniuses of our planet, past and present, was being downloaded into my consciousness. Part 3 of this consciousness was that while I was spinning into this tunnel, and so many talk about this in their near-death experience, you feel this overwhelming sense of peace, of love, of compassion. And I tell so many different people that your mindset is not that of human form, because you're not in human form as much as you are in spirit or the essence of spirit form. And as this information is coming your way, you don't question, you don't doubt, you accept, and you allow. And I think that's the most important thing, because I have so many people from all around the world who email me and send me messages on Facebook, and they have this, God as a certain mindset. And what people don't understand, the mindset is beyond human. And I think that if we think like humans, you don't understand the mindset of God. And so for me to understand the mindset of God, I had to allow, and not again, obviously you're in spirit form. You don't think like a human. You think in frequency thought patterns. And that's what I was experiencing with these codes. I was digesting, understanding, and allowing these codes to be a part of the process. And then, of course, the life review, which I think for so many of us is life altering, because this is important. 0 to 60, your whole life review is based upon what you did, what you didn't do, what you could have done. And I always say the shoulda, coulda, wouldas. And there is no judgment. And I want to be real clear to your listening audience and those who are tuning in for the first time regarding near-death experiences. There is no judgment. For century after century after century, we've been taught to judge. We have been taught to have opinions. We've been taught to categorize. When you're on the other side, there is no Christian, there is no Muslim, there is no black, there is no white, there is no gay, there is no straight, there is no wealthy, there is no poor. There is the essence of spirit, and as you're spinning through this tunnel, that essence is that of love. And so when you are looking at your life review, you're not judging it. You're not saying to myself, oh my God, what a horrible human being I am. I'm so sorry, I should have done this. You don't do that. What you do is you look upon your life review and you, in this very loving, kind way that you would to your best friend, or even that matter of, when you're talking to your animal who's pooed on the floor, you wouldn't scold as much as, but you think in terms of the spirit world, I could have done better.
Yeah. You mentioned one moment with your sister at the locker that you regretted because you kind of blew her off, but later that night she was killed by a drunk driver.
Right, yeah.
And you felt that as a terribly missed opportunity.
Well, when you're looking down at this, and you see yourself, and again, you see yourself with such compassionate eyes. Again, no judgment. But what I learned from that, not saying to my sister on my birthday, I love you. I mean, I mentioned to you when we had our conversation prior to this interview,
Yes.
that we were in an orphanage, and my brother and my sister and I, we were each other's family. Mm-hmm. And so when I lost my sister to a drunk driver, that whole feeling of should have said this, what I learned from that experience, and those who know me and know me well, when I end my conversations with people, I say how much I love them. And it's not that I go back and hold guilt about that I didn't say that I love you. But for me, the experience of that is to show people that I love them, because it's a beautiful thing to say to someone. And, we don't have any guarantees. And I learned that myself. We come in and we leave. And I think for me, I live every day as though today is my last day. So I live it fully. And so when I talk to my friends and I have a stepbrother, I mean, I mentioned that I love you. And it comes from the most purest place. And I mean that. So it's an opportunity that allows me to continue that what I saw on the other side.
Right. Now, you mentioned also that at some point you saw a tree with either an old man or an angel sitting in it. Tell us about that and what that might have meant.
For me, and I say it was an ascended masters, and I say this, and I sometimes upset the evangelical community, or the Christian community, or religious community. They say, "Oh, you that was Jesus." Well, I don't know that it was Jesus. I can't say, because it's not like he sat on the tree with me and go, "Hey, my name is Jesus, and we're going to talk about this, that, and the other." It didn't happen that way. But again, when I say sit in the tree, I wasn't sitting there with my legs dangling. I was sitting in this tree, or witnessing the tree, from an ethereal sense, from this sense of spirit, and I could sense this energy field around me, male energy, golden frequency, and it was male for sure. And I was there, and I said, ascended master, maybe it was Jesus, maybe it was an angel, maybe it was, my God, who knows what it was. I don't like to put it in a category, but for me, it was profound. And I go back to this tree, and many people make fun of me for bringing up this tree, but I learned later on, when I finally started speaking to IANDS, it was Dennis Purcell, who was the facilitator of the Los Angeles IANDS group, who explained to me that was the tree of life. Well, I never heard of the tree of life. But when he said that to me, that resonated within so deeply in my soul and my spirit, and I accepted that because it felt right to me. So as I'm sitting here with this male energy, the conversation that went on between the two of us, again, from spirit to spirit, was telepathic.
Wow. I'm going to have to send you a copy of my novel, which has got a lot about the tree of life in it.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Love that.
Now, did you have a conversation with whoever it was sitting in the tree?
The ascended master I referred to. I did, actually. And
what did you talk about?
Well, it wasn't so much what I spoke. It's like, we're not having a typical conversation, like I said, that you and I are having. We go back to that mindset of God or the ascended master. It's beyond that way of thinking. For me, it was looking at I call human error. So many people speak of sin. I don't look at people and sin as a category, but where we didn't shine, where we weren't our best spirit. And so for me, when I got a chance to see my human era, there was this. It was almost as though my grandmother was such a loving, compassionate woman, and there never was judgment with her. She just made you want to do better just by being in her presence. So I can only tell you this, that experience on the other side with this ascended master multiplied that by 1 million times. I just wanted to do better, not for his sake, but for my sake. So the conversation that did take on was, as I reviewed my life and these moments that we do experience. I think so many times for us who had near-death experiences, I go 0 to 60. Every moment is recorded. It's as though there is a matrix. And those moments that I had forgotten about, those conversations in the park, the young boy that I played with when I was 5 years old, my third grade teacher, Mrs. Bellamy, my my heated conversation with cable because I felt the bill was too high. All those moments in life, I got a chance to see or to witness where I didn't shine. And I use the cable because I think oftentimes for me, when I'm having this conversation with the credit card company or the cable or whatever that conversation is, and it's almost like talking to the DMV, they don't care, and you find yourself rising to that moment of frustration, I go back to that moment of my near-death experience and recall those moments where I didn't shine. And so when I find myself going down that rabbit hole of emotion, I take a deep breath and just allow the conversation to continue. And so I've learned so oftentimes that for me, my life review wasn't so much about, it's not that I murdered someone. It's not like I, robbed a bank. Those moments were in the car with me speeding down the highway, going down rush hour traffic downtown Los Angeles on a Friday afternoon. And so I learned very quickly coming back that I think our higher consciousness is kind of indicative of where we are at 5 o'clock rush hour traffic on Friday. And so I'm reminded of that, and I really try to be a better driver. And that sounds kind of juvenile, but when you tackle those smaller moments in your life, when those bigger moments of frustration and anger and, when it comes to an example, dealing with your boss or betrayed relationship, you learn to come from a different place.
Right. Now you described possibly going through the bardo, something toward God, and then encountering an entity that was like gold fragments of light.
Right.
What was that about?
I call this, and for those who are Catholic, you'll understand this. For those who are Buddhist, you'll understand this. It's a place called Bardo. Now, I didn't know it was Bardo. When I came back from my near-death experience, I began to do lots of research, and it wasn't until probably a couple of years ago that I learned this place called Bardo. But Bardo, I call it the cleansing station. But Bardo is after you've experienced your life review, you go to the next level. And Bardo is like purgatory. It's like limbo. And I got a chance to have this conversation with this. Imagine the solar sun, but in itself, it's nothing but fragments of currency, electrical currency, fragments of gold light. And this conversation I was having with this advanced being, much more, I think, than the man on the tree, but this was I can't even begin to explain this. I say it was my conversation with God, because what happened was, though this presence was in front of me, I could feel the essence of magnetic energy, frequency, coming in from my back. But of course, I'm not in physical form, coming in and going through my solar plexus. And what happened, I was able to, I guess like a zoom lens, to look down at Mother Earth and to look at our animal kingdom. I see the pollution. You watch that one of those YouTube videos, I could see that we were so eager to put people in power who were so eager to take our power away. And it's not, again, we go back to judgment. It's not that I was judging, but what I was seeing and understanding was that everything on Mother Earth is connected to Source, is connected to One. you, me, the planet, the rocks, the ocean, the animal kingdom, the trees, the roots of the tree, everything, sand, everything is one. And when we are not taking care of Mother Earth, we are not taking care or coming to the place of a higher consciousness to God. And so as I'm looking down at this and seeing, as I said, the massacring of the dolphin and what they were doing to horses in the Everglades and dogs and cats, and then also I got a chance to witness war and the depreciation of Mother Planet. And I remember, and I'm having this conversation with this fragment of energy, I said, this is not what God intended. And for me, that was an epiphany. That was a moment of an awakening, because you see, prior to my near-death experience, I was agnostic. I was a former Catholic. I didn't believe in God. I didn't believe in Jesus. I didn't believe in any of this stuff because I felt it just didn't make sense to me. And I questioned. And so while I'm having this conversation with what I refer to as God, and people ask me, do I believe in God? Absolutely. I remember saying that this is not what God intended. So as I accelerated around the planet, again, like a zoom lens, I began to realize that when I came back and processed this information of 7 years, I became an activist for the planet, the animal kingdom, and for those people who are abused, and for the poor. And for me, that made that I felt like I had an authentic purpose by doing so. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Well, one of them. Now you got a glimpse of your future life, which was, yes. I mean, it was not going to be a perfect ongoing existence for you back on Earth. Did they give you a choice as to whether to stay or go?
I was given a choice, and I remember the voice said to me, do you want to go back? And here, again, think of yourself in spirit form. Look at just use the movie or film as an example. We go to black space. We cut to black, and all you hear is a voice, and you hear two voices having a conversation. And again, the big screen is nothing but a black screen, and now we cut to the planet. You're seeing all this. I call the persecution from the planet. And I was able to see not only the medical complications and the attempted suicide and the lost relationships and the not fitting in and the isolation, but I also saw myself no longer stuttering. I also saw myself traveling around the planet. I also saw myself helping children. I saw myself adopting animals from kill shelters, and that gave me a sense of purpose. So when I did come back, knowing what I knew, it didn't matter, because to me there was the finish line, there was the end result, and that motivated me. I also saw my ability as an artist to fade away, and when I came back into the real world, I was obsessed with math.
Isn't that interesting? Wow.
Yeah.
The other thing that I was struck with was your intuitive understanding that the medicines they were giving you in the hospital were poisoning you, and that what you really needed were vitamins and natural healing substances.
Remedies,
yeah, really. Talk a little about that, and and also tell us what kind of a reception you got when you tried to tell people about your NDE.
Well, I'll tackle the first question, meaning my reception with the medications. And again, seeing this on the other side, I knew when I came back, when I got out of ICU, when I was out of my unconscious state, I could taste the medicines. I could feel the surgery inside of my stomach. I could feel the scars and the even I could still feel the surgery knives inside of my anal tract. And so imagine, I think, smelling the drugs in your system and knowing that they're poisoning you. And so when I did eventually wake up, I immediately started talking to the doctor. Now, for me, my aha moment was, I had a speech impediment, so I was always the one who didn't want to speak up because I was afraid people would make fun of me. And so I spoke freely, and I began to question, the prednisone, the high doses of prednisone. I began to question the morphine. I began to question, the cortisone, everything, the sulfur drugs that were feeding me. I could feel in my system almost as a newborn baby, that it was poisoning my system. And the doctors would look at me and the nurses would look at me like I was a nut job. But I think the doctor was fascinated that how did I know? Because obviously I was unconscious, but I could tell him where my hemoglobin levels were. I could tell him what my blood count was. I could tell him, the doses of prednisone. I didn't even know looking back, I didn't know what prednisone was and why and the effects of it. So I was talking to this doctor as though he was, like he was, that I was a doctor. So it's not that I meant to insult him, but I knew I had a mission ahead of me. And the longer he kept me under these medicines, the longer it was going to take me to recover. So I had work to do. And then again, I wasn't welcomed by the medical community. I think the biggest problem that so many of us who've had near-death experiences, that the isolation and the medical industry or business is not taught how to deal with people who've had near-death experiences. Number one, medications. Number two, to come back and talk about, like I did, my conversation with God. They look at you as though, the medicines they're giving you are creating hallucinations. So I wasn't welcome down that particular alley. But the longer I spoke, the more I spoke, I think there was a nurse who would listen to me. And then when my own doctor came in to see me, he was the one that let me know that I had a near-death experience. He didn't call it a near-death experience. He said, "We lost you for several minutes, but you're here now." So he called me his miracle patient. So I think for me, the most important thing that I learned from the medical field to this day is that I think that if they deal so much in data, the processing of data, proof, like math, like I deal with the analysis of math, 1 and 2 equals 3. And so I think for the medical community, I think what would be so beneficial is to teach, the nurses and the staff and the interns, if someone like myself has a conversation, at least listen and not judge us.
Right. I want to save a little time here to talk about ghosts and the fact that you came back, you could see ghosts in the hospital.
Yes.
And just as a little bit of background for our listeners, in the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church believed that purgatory was a place, that it was and to the 20th century popes like John Paul II and Benedict, they declared purgatory was not a place but a temporary condition of existence, which says to me the world of ghosts. Pope Benedict said Catherine of Genoa described it as not a place but an inner fire, which means like a hang-up, something that's holding them, keeping them from moving on into the light. Now, you've been helping people like that along with your investigations into murders and all of the really interesting things that we should devote another program to it sometime. But talk about purgatory and how you communicate with ghosts.
Well, the first thing I'm going to say is I disagree with the inner fire. I'm going to talk about, it's called the inner world. And it's the thin veil. Within the thin veil, there are other dimensions within dimensions. And I think so many of us who've had near-death experiences, we are heightened. It's almost like the animal kingdom. They are tuned into the magnetic energy of the magnetic energy of Mother Earth. Well, I happen to be tuned in to frequency. I think part of my conversation with this frequency on the other side taught me how to tune in to these, these other dimensions. And I think when I was on I say this, I don't think I understand that when ghosts were coming to me when I was in the hospital after I got out of ICU, the nurses and the doctors who had passed before would show up in my room. There's a movie called Ghost with Whoopi Goldberg and Patrick Swayze. I think this movie, though it's a comedy, a black comedy, has a lot more spot-on information about the other side than most other movies and most other series. But for me, this inner frequency has been the saving grace for me to help these spirits to cross over to the other side, because like me and like so many of us who've had near-death experiences, they too want to get into the white light.
Mm-hmm. And they have provided you with information in for example, tracking down who might possibly have murdered them, for example.
Well, actually, it's all unresolved issues. And as I mentioned so many times in these interviews, we have been, conditioned by Hollywood. It's called the Boo effect, the Conjuring and the Nun and Conjuring 1, 2, 3 and all these different, the Amityville Horror. I'm not saying these things don't exist, but what I am saying is that most of the cases I worked in, 90% of the cases I worked were nothing more than trapped spirits that wanted to go the other side. Normal people whose lives were cut short, who were held back. And my job was to have these conversations with these spirits and to help resolve the conflicts that were not resolved, and to explain to the scientists and the crew and the director and those people on these different shows, how these cases, if they had been solved, years ago or months ago or decades ago, if someone had the experience, like so many of us who are good with spirit world, help resolve these cases, I think there would be less ghosts trapped on the planet.
Mm. Your website provides some links to YouTube interviews you've done. I would encourage people to go to your website. And so why don't you tell listeners how they can find your website and also your book?
Well, my website is the www.theaccidentalprophet.com. So you can send me an email there or just contact me there, and I do respond. And not rather quickly. I get a lot of emails daily. And also, Keymaster is on Amazon, and I always say Keymaster is like garlic. You either like it or you don't. And then my next book, which is the sequel to Keymaster, is called The Accidental Prophet, and I'm hoping to have this out by the summertime. And I think that so many readers will be so fascinated with this, because not only do I go into the near-death experience, but I go into grid work, I go into the animal kingdom, I go into spirits and the form, and I go into so many different religions, and I go into what I call the vortex, the Sedona, and I call it vortex work, the Sedonas and the Mauis and the Mount Shastas and Stonehenge and all those different energy grids, where I make a pilgrimage every year on my birthday and go there and just spend 29 days there and aligning my grids so I can do work on the planet. So it's a powerful book. I'm very, very excited to have it out.
Wow, I look forward to it. I love the Sedona area. I have a straw bale house out there myself in that general area. And perhaps sometime you're out there, we could get together.
Oh, I would love it. We'll see. I have a tentative hold on a booking in Sedona at the end of April, so we'll see if it confirms. But yes, I'll let you know. Okay.
Perhaps we can have you back to talk more about the world of ghosts and numerology, for that matter. We haven't covered that on the program at all, and I'd like to do that. But for now, let me thank you once again for sharing the story of your NDE and how it influenced the direction of your life profoundly. If listeners would like to listen to this show again or any of our nearly 400 past shows, just go to NDE Radio and hit the past shows button. For more information about IANDS, just click on their website, IANDS.org. And be with us again next Monday, 11 a.m. Eastern, for more NDE Radio. This is Lee Witting saying thanks for listening.